Hey guys, and welcome to the Kane Audio vlog. It's Friday. Unfortunately it is actually Friday and I've been having issues with my computer when it comes to background rendering these videos. So hopefully it's Friday when this video actually comes out. If it's not, whatever, deal with it, move on. Before I get started with the weekly AMA, usual rules apply. If you've got a question for me, then comment below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's. As for house admin, what have I done this week? I have helped my mum move house. Musically, I've been working on this. I don't know if you can see it. Hopefully you can get a little sneak preview. I am slowly but surely building a synth of my own. At the moment I've transferred it into Reactor Player because I know that's a free download for anyone who wants to use it, and I'm just really starting to get to grips with the basics of the sort of lower end of the insides of the filters, the oscillators. So I've got a few sort of bunched up and noise generators, bits and pieces in there, and this all started because I'm in this temporary studio. I don't have my sub 37 out at the moment, although I probably will unpack it soon. But I kind of thought to myself, you know what, I know exactly what my sort of Dom Kane sound is on the sub 37, and I know roughly what's going on inside the oscillators because I don't save presets on that. So, you know, I build it every time I make it, and so I kind of thought, yeah, well, what can I do digitally? So I thought I'll try and build my own digital synth and see where I get with that. So yeah, so I've sort of just loaded up a sound at the moment. So yeah, it's all very rough, but as you can hear, the cutoff works, and that's a good start. Yeah, so I will probably update more on that as I go along. Hopefully in the next couple of months I'll be able to offer it out to you guys as a download. I'll build some presets for it as well, obviously. Yeah, so there we go. That's the house admin done for now. Straight on to this week's AMA. Last week's video, the comments. L7, you should make a Hackintosh. PC is way cheaper than Mac. Okay, so first of all, there's an issue with Hackintosh. If you're using it as your home computer and doing bedroom production or graphic design or whatever, then yeah, I agree, a Hackintosh is a great way forward. However, my experience of Hackintoshes in professional environments, they don't quite work so well because you're generally a kind of a bit of a step behind in things like software updates, and if another artist or producer or a session musician or you know, a client of any sort comes in and they've got files on newer versions of the software, then things can go corrupt. Also, because I beta test and alpha test for a lot of different companies, I feel like if I had a Hackintosh and some of the elements aren't fully supported by Apple or Microsoft or whatever, then there could be potential issues. If I'm getting a bug in a feature of something in beta testing, then I don't know if that's going to be down to the synth or down to the Hackintosh. So there are a few sort of questionable bits there. As for PC being cheaper than Mac, it is these days, yeah, because I have actually spec'd up a PC as well when I first started looking, because I was looking at the toilet brush holder Mac Pro 2013s, and you know, they start at what is it, $3 grand for the base model, and I sort of figure, well, if I'm going to get something that big and expensive, then, you know, I want at least mid-range machine. But then you're up to 4,000-5,000 and you're still on 2013 tech, and I kind of figured that's not, if I'm spending that amount of money, you know, I don't want it to be that old. It just doesn't make any sense. So I don't know what Apple are playing at there. So I did then spec up a PC, and I built a monster machine for about 4,000, just seeing, you know, in comparisons and whatever. So it's kind of an option, but I do use Final Cut Pro for all of my videos. I do use Apple Motion sometimes. I have done it. If you look at, I think on my Dom Kane YouTube channel, there's I think I posted a video there for one of my tracks, Traction, and another one, Running Out. I think I publicly posted that. That was just me playing around in Motion, putting together some bits and pieces. So I'm not locked to Apple. Bitwig, I'm guessing most of my VSTs, if not all of them, will run fine on a PC, so I'm not against the idea. I do have a PC for when I'm doing the Oculus Rift sound design stuff, so I'm not dead against PC. And in fact, the astute guys of you will notice I have a Samsung phone, which I used to have an iPhone and moved over to Samsung. So yeah, so I'm not like PC versus Mac. Right, Zombo, if you got the time, build a Hackintosh. Another one. Yeah, so I think I've just written off Hackintosh really, just because you know, a lot of my work has critical deadlines, and if there's a software update, you have to quite literally hack around it or wait or whatever, and you know, that's not something I want to be in a position. I just don't want it to go wrong. If I've got a client expecting a deadline and I have to submit something to a deadline, you know, the last thing I want on that day is some software update to just corrupt everything. And you know, it's difficult enough when you're on an Apple supported machine. You know, if you look at whatever the latest OS is, I mean, this is proof of the pudding. I haven't updated to the latest 2 or 3 OSs, partly because my machine no longer supports it, but also I never did until probably 6 months after release date, because as we all know, you know, things like Native Instruments, they're always up to date, but there's always that sort of smaller company who do a few VSTs here and there, and you know, you update to the latest OS and boom, nothing works anymore. So I'm kind of a bit scared of that with the Hackintosh thing, and I can see a reply there to that one from Cavo K. Got to second this, if you can get it stable, and that's the big if. It makes it so much cheaper and easier to build and upgrade. You could build yourself a monster. I keep seeing people bleating about Hackintoshes being illegal. That's bollocks. Yeah, I don't know about the law. I don't much care about it when it comes to a huge conglomerate like Apple, but I guess that is potentially an issue. Worst case, it's just a breach of EULA terms. Yes, but they can have quite serious consequences, especially when all of my vital work is on that machine, and if they were to find out for whatever reason and just shut my system down, who knows what Apple can do. Which US legislator suggests would be unenforceable and not something law enforcement would be interested in. Probably true. That leaves a suit instigated by Apple, which they apparently aren't going to bother with unless you're selling Hackintosh systems. Fair enough. However, with an eye on the wider IT industry, the signs are pointing towards Apple stopping production of iMacs and probably MacBooks within the 5 to 10 years, as they're either unprofitable or barely profitable. Yeah, but, so I think, you know, talking business, and I think this is, if you can twist this into your music production career, we have what's called loss leaders, and I have talked a bit before about giving stuff away for free, and I disagree with doing that in general. You know, your music and whatever. Yeah, Apple were obviously, you know, in the computer industry, and then the phone industry, and now God knows what, they're probably going into self-driving cars. But they will still, you know, the thing you have to remember, the thing that made Apple as big as they are today was really the iPhone, because they're carrying an Apple logo in their pocket. Everyone has an Apple logo in their pocket, and I still think that there is a big market for the pro machines. They might not be profitable, but if you walk into pretty much any studio for music these days, and actually a lot of TV studios as well, there'll be, you know, a little Apple logo in the corner, or an iMac or whatever. So it might not be hugely profitable, but it is probably keeping the brand awareness out there, and blah 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 blah. Right, so yeah, and the iPad Pro covers the needs of most producers. It will. Serious creatives and heavy system users are going to be shit out of luck. Yes. Windows users won't be much better off once they move to a desktop as a service model after Windows 10, rumour has it. Oh, that'd be interesting. Yeah, I reckon that's one of the reasons why more software companies like Bitwig are offering a Linux version. Sorry, that was a long-winded. I need to start writing comments after a glass of wine. Fair enough. I like the ramble though, and you're mostly right on all of that. You know, I don't think, you know, even after Windows 10, if they go online only or whatever, then, you know, look at Windows 8 when they tried making that to look like a tablet. It was terrible, and everybody kicked off. Everybody went, what the fuck? And so they turned around and adjusted it accordingly. So I don't think we're at too much risk of that right now, but certainly somewhere in the future. But I think that the tech will need to get there first, because, you know, we're talking about the entire media industry here, and they carry a lot of clout. Unknown artist, first of all, thanks for the email the other day. It was much appreciated. Hi Dom, I think I can speak for most of the Kane family here. It's the fact that you come across like a decent human being, and you have reached goals that I, being one, would love to hit in my musical ventures. I would 100% give money to someone that is down to earth and helping others. Hands off to you when mentioning that you do it for the love of your job. It feels most artists, bar some of those on Mau5trap, just pop up and they're created for doing very little. What's your opinion on this? Yeah, but I think that's always been the case, and I've kind of touched on this in a different way, I suppose, where, you know, I always use the example of the pop industry. So, and I keep using this example, which is probably a bit outdated now, but if you look at, let's say, Britney Spears, you know, huge global success in her prime, and toured the world doing gigs, and yet I sincerely doubt she ever really gave any input to a writing camp and the lyrics of her song. Chances are she essentially showed up to the studio, did whatever she needed to do, i.e. thrash out a few things, get it tuned, and that's, you know, let the engineers do the rest. And then when it comes to touring, you know, put on some pretty outfits and look good for everyone, and then pretend to sing, you know, because the vast majority of her gigs she's just miming. So really she's more of a dancer than a singer, and, you know, that's the way the pop industry has always been, you know, and you can even find bands in the 60s and 70s, as soon as tapes were invented properly and used, you know, people would mime over tape. So I don't think that's unheard of at any point in the industry. I just think that electronic dance music as a whole over the last decade has been kind of swallowed up a bit by the pop industry and by that manufactured side of it. But that's not to say there isn't still huge talent out there. And there are a lot of artists, I think, if you look hard enough, and unfortunately you have to look harder these days, but there are artists out there who put in, you know, 100% energy and creativity, and they really make, you know, they have a huge input, whether it be people like Echo or another good friend of mine, Third Son, you know, in the techno scene. You know, he puts so much thought into all of his artwork. Even his Instagram always looks great, you know. He does live feeds where he's just playing with hardware and writing songs, and, you know, there's a lot to sort of involve yourself in there, and he's an incredible artist and writes incredible music. And I think there's a lot of people out there like that. So yeah, so I think that kind of touches on the what was I think it was Cakewalk or someone a couple of weeks ago mentioned, I keep wanting to say Timmy Mallet, but that was my childhood TV character, Timmy Trumpet, that was it. You know, I don't know who Timmy Trumpet is, but it got brought up a few weeks ago, and, you know, I mean, just the name is silly enough. So I think you've got to kind of separate yourself from the artist and the clown. You know, which one do you want to be? Do you want to be the artist or the clown? Because you can't be both. And there's a lot of clowns out there, and there's a lot of clowns making a lot of money. But there's also a lot of artists who are making great money, enviable money. I wouldn't say it's huge money like the clowns, but, you know, I've always said that I'm lucky enough where I am proud of every dollar or pound or euro that I've earned. I don't think there is any work that I've ever completed and submitted as a project and earned money from where I've thought, oh, I wish I hadn't have done that, you know. I don't think there's any work that I wasn't proud of at the time. I might not be so proud of it now. There's going to be loads of tracks that I did early in my career. I've never changed my artist name either as my main name, so there's a whole history of crap out there, which if I listened back to now I'd probably cringe. But at the time I was proud of that, and I think still today I'm proud that I did that and did something. So yeah, I think that's kind of where my opinion is on these people. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there who just will do anything for money, and I just kind of feel like it's almost a dishonest way of earning money, and it's almost fraudulent, and that's not something I would want to go down. You know, for example, I would never want to be stood on stage in EDC Las Vegas or whatever, miming to lyrics and then pretending to hit buttons and pretending to DJ. That just doesn't, it's not something I would enjoy, and I think I would feel a lot of guilt if I did something like that and got paid for it, because, you know, it's you guys out there watching this, you're the guys who pay the artists, you're the guys who, you know, things like the merch I have on sale, you know, you're the guys that support my career in that, you know, you're the guys who buy my singles or whatever. And if you guys paid however many $100 it is to go and see me in a festival, I don't think I could sleep very well if all I did in that festival was get drunk, jump around like an idiot and pretend to do something, you know, while playing a mix CD or whatever. That's you know, it's not in my interest to do that. So I guess I'm trying not to judge others for doing it, because they might have valid reasons and I just can't defend them, I suppose. So yeah. Again, thanks for your time. Don't worry about not giving advice on the wife situation, but some advice for you: don't do it. Okay. Yeah, I'm quite happily in a relationship, so I don't feel your pain. Deadly Custard. Hey Dom, when you are mastering a project, do you have a loudness which you aim for, or does it just come out how it comes out once you've applied the amount of limiting etc that you can get without it adversely affecting your work? Good question. Do you meter with RMS or LUFS, and what's the difference? Right. Before I get any further, I think I have enough experience where I kind of just play it by ear. However, I will always check the references, because there are times, depending on the instrumentation and depending on the levels within a mix, and you will notice that the louder tracks tend to have louder mid-range volumes, so your synths and whatever, and they appear louder than they actually are sometimes. So because of that, what is it, the Fletcher-Munson curves, I think, if I remember rightly, you know, because of that we have natural compression in our ears depending on volume and frequency and whatever. So I think it's wise to check the meters, even though I've been doing this for however many years. I work towards LUFS, but only the last couple of years I've been doing that, really. I was going with, do you know what, I don't even know what the measurement was. It wasn't RMS, although I will sort of check the RMS, but RMS is a very short range measurement. So RMS is root mean squared, which means if you to get a perfect sine wave, it goes up to +1, down to +1, up to +1, down to +1. If you were to measure the average of +1, -1, +1, -1, the average is 0. So you can't do an average of a sine wave like that. So RMS is a way of measuring the average volume without including the negatives, and the way you do that is you square all the numbers. So if it's going +1, -1, +1, -1, then it's +1 squared, -1 squared, which becomes a positive, +1 squared, -1 squared, which becomes a positive. Then you work out the average, and so RMS, root mean squared, and then you reverse it and blah blah blah. That's probably a really bad way of explaining it. I'm sure someone else can do a better job, but that's essentially what RMS is. So RMS, you're really just looking at short range volume within sine waves, or so, you know, move into the mastering field, you know, you're measuring essentially the amplitude of most of what's going on right now in this moment. Measuring across the length of an entire track is very different, and that's where LUFS comes in. So it's loudness units. I don't even know what the FS is, but it's essentially a longer measurement. So you measure the track loudness from start to finish, and you take an approximate average based on various different things, which takes into account the is it the PLR, which is the something loudness ratio, which is basically the difference between the loudest parts and the quietest parts, and you measure the range between those. So if you have a very dynamic track which has some really quiet moments and then some really loud moments, then you'll generally get an okay LUFS. So that's kind of the difference, I suppose. So LUFS is more for measuring an entire track, whereas RMS is more for measuring a sequence within a track. So yeah, so I do work towards targets, but it often depends on the client as well. So you have to bear in mind that YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and probably a few others that I can't think of right now, they all adjust the volumes in. So for example, Apple Radio or YouTube or Spotify will, if you send in you know, if you have release a track through them and it's super compressed and super loud, they will bring the volume down until it feels like -14 LUFS or -16 LUFS. They're all slightly different, but they all aim for roughly the same thing. So it kind of negates the whole loudness war, and it means that you can compress the shit out of a track and it's not really going to sound much better when it comes to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Radio, and the vast majority are starting to pick this up now. So I think that's something that's quite important to bear in mind. Anything above, say, -12 LUFS, the smaller the negative number, the louder it is. So anything above -12, you're almost wasting time and energy trying to get it any louder. However, I've also spoken to like a good friend of mine, Ian Shepherd, who runs productionadvice.co.uk, I think. A phenomenal mastering engineer, does a lot of mastering for bands and, you know, DVDs, Blu-rays, things like that. So he's shit hot on that, and I've sort of talked to him about the interesting thing with electronic music is that a lot of it is heard in nightclubs. And so if you're playing a track that's hitting, say, -4 LUFS and is squashed to shit and super loud, and then you mix it into a track as a DJ that's, say, -12, 14, 16 and really nice and dynamic, you know, they're going to sound drastically different. So there is a bit of a grey area with electronic music as a whole, because of the listening environment. But when it comes to radio play, Spotify and whatever, there's not really a huge difference. So you kind of aim for somewhere in between the two, I think. However, I'll have some clients who don't know about that, and quite often I'll tell them that's how it works. And so you know, if someone's saying, oh, I want it super loud, and they're self-releasing on Spotify, then I will quite often go, well, you do realise Spotify bring the volume down if it's too loud. So do you really want it that loud? Whereas there might be other clients who go, do you know what, actually, as a creative choice, I want this track to sound really squashed and no dynamics and whatever. So I think a lot of it depends on the client. For my own music, I kind of just play it by ear. I've just done a track, in fact I've uploaded a clip on my SoundCloud of the intro of a track, and at the moment I know that's over compressed. It's just a draft, but I know I've over compressed it because I can hear some of the transients being lost, and so I know I need to scale that back without having looked at any meters. I know it needs to get scaled back. At the moment, like I say, it's draft, so I'm not hugely bothered. So yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm always surprised when a music compilation is released featuring tracks of different volumes. This seems a little bonkers to me. Yeah, it's an odd one, but a lot of compilations, the tracks are maybe mixed and mastered by different people. So it's not always possible to get it right. However, I think people are starting to develop software packages that can analyze an entire compilation, you know, much like Spotify or YouTube would do. They would just adjust the volume accordingly. So I think that's probably just one of those issues that we've got in the current modern day industry, but I don't think it's going to be a huge problem in the future, I suppose. So yes, I can see my camera is about to hit the 28, is just hit the 28-minute mark, so I'm just going to hit pause and then start again so it doesn't cut out halfway through a sentence. See you in a bit. And I'm back. Right, so we are getting there. Deadmau5, the Mexican Deadmau5. Thanks for the video. Very helpful informations in this episode. I finally got a question or two. So do you think it is better to plug your headphones into the audio interface or to use headphone amplifier? And also, what is your... Right, I'll answer that bit first. If you have a headphone amplifier and it is a good one, then you're better off doing that. However, I kind of feel like if you have a good audio interface, then it should have a good headphone amp in there. But if you are using budget headphones or budget anything, then it kind of doesn't matter, because this is something when it comes to, for example, building the studio. Your studio or your setup or your hardware will only ever be as good as the weakest link in the chain. So if, for example, I had a super amazing audio interface and I had great hardware, gold-plated cables, everything is top of the range, but shit monitors, then all of that other stuff is not getting used to the way it should, you know. So it's all about just slowly upgrading your system bit by bit. When I started producing music, I started on a shit pair of headphones on a shit PC laptop, and then I eventually got myself a good hi-fi, not monitor speakers, a hi-fi, and I used to use that as my monitor speakers. Then I think eventually I got a decent audio interface, and it wasn't great, but it was alright. And then, you know, maybe 6 months later I could afford some budget monitors, so I moved up to those, and you just slowly build everything up, I suppose, is the way to do it. So it's a difficult question to answer, because headphones into the audio interface are fine if you've got a good audio interface and good headphones. Otherwise, if your audio interface doesn't have a dedicated headphone amp, then you're better off giving it a dedicated headphone amp. It also depends on the resistance of the headphones as well. If you're using, you know, 250 ohms headphones instead of 16 ohm headphones, then, you know, it's going to need a lot more power to get through that resistance to give you the full range of dynamics. So in that sort of instance, I would say, yeah, you need a good, powerful headphone amp. What was the rest of your question? Or headphone amplifier. Also, what is your opinion on producing and mixing with headphones? I've kind of answered this before. I think some people can do it, some people can't. I can't mix on headphones. Maybe because I have some great audio monitors, but also a very transparent audio interface with the Audient you can see down there, and the event opals there, and I've also got some focals, and I've got some Yamahas, and I think I've probably got another set somewhere, so I can reference between the lot, because I know the characters of each one, so I can kind of get everything covered. So I'm very lucky that I can do that. So for me, when I put on a pair of headphones, it's not my normal setup, and I'm not comfortable with that. But if that's all you have, then, you know, you quickly get used to it. If somebody took away my monitors and I had to use headphones for 6 months, chances are 3 months in it wouldn't quite be so bad. I got my Beyerdynamic DT770 Pro 250 ohm version. I have those as well last week, and I've got Focusrite Scarlett Solo 2nd gen. Okay, I hear good things about that, because I feel it's wrong for me to get studio monitors since my room isn't acoustically treated. That's very important, and this is also the better option for me for now, because I can work without any distractions, and I don't bother anyone because they can't hear me. Thanks ahead. Love the merch. Thank you very much. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're doing the right thing there, because when you work in your spare room, as I am right now, I'm quite fortunate in the situation I have here, so I'm not too bothered by it. But if you're in a block of flats or something and you're attached to your neighbours, you know, they can hear everything you're doing. And if you're the kind of person that has a day job and you work 9 to 5 and you come home and you want to eat some food and then you want to start chilling out and maybe making some music at 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, you can't crank it up on big monitors. So yeah, that's exactly the situation I'm talking about, where, you know, headphones are pretty much the only option. And yeah, so I would say treat your headphones like monitors, in that you need to be able to go to a good shop that can have maybe 5, 6, 7 pairs of headphones in your budget and get the absolute best you can, because, you know, for some reason we all seem happy to spend thousands on monitor speakers, and then we spend, you know, we struggle to spend 100 on headphones. And that's, you know, if you're only using headphones, treat your budget as that's your big budget, you know. So yeah, you need to get the best you can. The Beyerdynamic DT770 Pro 250 ohm versions happen to be the exact ones I use, and I do like them. They do sound good. They have a great range, because they're 250 ohms, and I think I mentioned 250 ohms earlier on. It's high resistance, so I would suggest the Focusrite Scarlett Solo I don't know if that's a fully dedicated and loaded headphone amp, so worth checking that out, but I would probably recommend getting a good headphone amp for them, because they're 250 ohm, which means they need, you know, they're a lot more hungry for the voltage. So there we go. Outsider, thank you for answering my questions last week, greatly appreciated, enjoyed watching this week's as always, thank you very much. Cavoke, cheers Dom, another useful and interesting AMA, particularly the bit on K20, so the metering. I suspected you'd want to wait to be in your new studio before doing the mixdown tutorial. Fingers crossed it comes together quickly. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm kind of planning a few mixdown tutorials. I'd like to do a series on mixdowns, but at the moment, because of the planning involved in getting those mixdowns, these weekly AMAs are great because I can literally, like this morning, you know, it's Friday morning, which is usually the day I upload the video. You know, I can switch on the camera, which is sat in the corner of the room all week, switch it on, hit record, and away I go, read out the questions. With a mixdown tutorial, it needs to be the right mixdown. I need to find the right features. I need to know what I'm kind of going to talk about. So I need to spend, you know, at least a day kind of planning that ahead. And it's a bit tricky when I'm in this temporary room and, you know, I need to be able to crank it up a bit and sort of mix between high volume, low volume stuff. And in this small room, the microphone you're listening to is right next to the monitor speaker, so I can't crank it up because you wouldn't hear a word I'm saying. So yeah, so I kind of need to wait till the new studio's done for that, and I definitely hope it comes together quickly. I have a question. Don't think anyone's asked it previously, but can't be sure. Which, if any, of Bitwig's internal devices do you tend to use? Yeah, I don't think I've been asked that. All of the effects. So if I, you know, when I'm producing, and I've kind of mentioned this before, not specific to Bitwig, but if I'm producing a track and I want some reverb, I'll just use Bitwig's reverb. I'm not going to go searching for weird and wonderful reverbs, because reverb is reverb, especially when it's coming to electronic music and I want a bit of reverb on a clap or a top line synth or something like that, you know. I'll just chuck in any old reverb. It really doesn't matter. If, for example, I'm in a high-grade studio and I'm doing a mixdown and I need to treat the vocals and it's a feature vocal, then I need to have high-quality reverb, and that's where I'll maybe start using some of the UAD reverbs or something like that. But if I'm producing a track and it's just a bit of reverb on a synth that's going to get drenched in other things anyway, it's going to be swamped, then, you know, I'll just use Bitwig's default reverb. So I use, they have an effect called Tree Monster. I love that. What else do they have? I use their distortion, I use their delays, I use the reverbs, pretty much all the effects that you'd ever use. I use Bitwig's default ones. When it comes to their synths, I don't use them so much. I do use the samplers a lot because I like being able to just, you know, for my drums and for things like that, you know, I like to play around with that. In fact, I've probably done a couple of tutorials on bits and pieces where I've used the sampler from Bitwig. And I like to be able to chain things in as well, so that's quite important to me. The new sampler, someone mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if it was you, but someone mentioned the Bitwig 2.4 sampler. I did spot them upload a video and I looked at that and then had to play around with it. Man, it's years ahead, it's amazing, which is great. As for their synths, I don't tend to use them so much, not because I don't like them, but more because I just haven't bothered playing with them properly. But I have every intention in doing that, and I'm actually thinking maybe I might look at doing a couple of videos for this channel on using some of the internal synths, because you know, while I've been making my own Kane Audio synth at the moment, I'm sort of thinking, right, well, my Moog Sub 37 does this, that and the other, the oscillators here, there, whatever. You know, the reality is that a lot of subtractive synths kind of really, they all do the same things, really. They all make the same sounds. It's just a case of knowing how to get those sounds out of them. Obviously with analog synths there's little bits of variance, but they are pretty subtle. Which do you think are a waste of time? I don't think any of them are, really. I don't think any of them are a waste of time. There are probably some that I don't use. For example, chorus. I don't use chorus on anything ever. You know, I think I wrote one track once. In fact, I wrote probably one of my biggest tracks early on in my career. I put some chorus on a snare drum, and it shows how old I am. This was getting pressed to vinyl, and this was when vinyl was big. And I remember finishing the track, finishing the mix down, sending it off to the mastering engineers, and there was this huge snare with a touch of chorus I'd put on it, and it just kept cutting through the vinyl when they were trying to, so they were mastering it and then they were doing a test cut to vinyl, and the needle would cut through the vinyl every time that snare hit happened. And it turned out it was all because of that chorus effect on there. For some reason it just killed the vinyl, the plate. So ever since then I just never bothered using chorus on anything. You live and learn. Personally, I used to be quite dismissive of native DAW plugins, but there are a few of Bitwig's that I seem to rely on more than VSTs. The people in the Bitwig user group on Facebook post some excellent tips and presets, and I think the last few Bitwig updates make it very hard to work with any other DAW. 100%, I agree with you. Yeah, Bitwig are just, they're leaps and bounds ahead of all the other DAWs at the moment, and there are such subtle little things that they're now adding to some of the built-in plugins. Yeah, I think it's going to get to a point eventually where, you know, other than maybe my favourite 3, 4, 5 VSTs, I'm really going to stop venturing out too much outside of Bitwig, because some of the stuff they're doing now is just incredible. And then finally, St. Nicholas, good day. Well, good day to you. And that, my friends, is it for vlog 47, AMA 21. So, as usual, if you have any questions, comments, whatever, want to get involved with this chat, then comment below this video on YouTube. And if you have made it this far into the video, then as usual you deserve a reward. Show to me that you have made it this far into the video by commenting the word socket. I'll see you next week. Cheers.